that one. But anyway, I want to make fun of this motherfucker because this is some really interesting stuff, and I just really want to get into this. So this is some really and I want to highlight my usage of the word interesting, because that's what this is. This is not this is a whole host of other adjectives and descriptors, but interesting, I believe, is, I think, the most, just because it's not necessarily negative, it's not necessarily positive, it makes you just want to look into this a little bit more, right? So I just want to classify this clip as interesting. So I want you to watch this clip, and I'm considering scrolling down because, I know, maybe I'll cue up the fucking Twonky song, but this clip is very interesting.
Medicare for All forcing a vote on Medicare for All was the centerpiece of the DSA strategy just a year ago, until apparently a movement arose about it. Here's the movement to make that happen. There are organizations on the left. This is...
Reminder, I just want to remind everybody that this is the movement that they're referring to. That's the movement. Right? So when this guy gets up on the steps and he's like, there's a movement. By the way, he's misrepresenting the DSA forcing of the vote. That's a strategy that you go into. It's not you force a vote without any fucking public publicity campaigns or promotion campaigns. Right? That's not what that forcing the vote is a multi-step procedural process, right? When DSA outlined it. So he's misrepresenting DSA and then throwing them under the bus, which is the largest organizational apparatus that supports a socialist agenda. But now again, I want to remind you, Nick Brana, who's this guy, you might be asking? This is a very interesting and this is very interesting and bizarre material that we're all currently viewing, right? So who is this individual, right? Nick Brana is someone that got kicked out of the Bernie 2016 campaign and then tried to do a draft Bernie for a third party thing, and Bernie was kind of I'm going to just pretend you don't exist right now. And so Nick Brana got personally upset. So he started the Movement for a People's Party, which is just a narcissistic, anti-democratic means to get in charge of something. Why is there a Green Party when there's a Libertarian Party? Well, both of them want people to be in the leadership positions. Look at the last 2020 Green primary, where they just wouldn't let certain candidates on the ballots, right? Where the campaign of, Howie Hawkins was run by, other leadership that had actual levers of power in the Green Party, right? And they wouldn't let certain people vote. It was a totally corrupt bunk process because they just wanted to have their name. Oh, I'm in the Green Party. And that's what this version of another party is. This is the People's Party, or rather the Movement for a People's Party, right? Because they're not a party yet, because they've had 4 years and they haven't even registered as a party. What? You were gonna get Bernie motherfucking Sanders on your ticket and you were not even gonna register as a party you had 3 years to register as a party and you didn't do so, right? So, okay. So it's a Movement for a People's Party. So I want you to understand that, and then let's go in.
It's been a moment that has really been disappointing, I think, to many of us on the left, because now this is so...
Now, I want to say, I don't know much about Nick Brana, right? I'm studying this character over the last couple of days, right? Maybe 48 hours. This guy is trying to include himself on the left, and I think that's a grifter thing. When people say us on the left, I feel I don't know. It pushes me away, it's kind of icky, you know?
So desperately needed. So many of us know, there were 30 million people who were already uninsured before coronavirus. Another 15 million people have lost their health insurance during coronavirus. We're the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care as a human right.
Now, this is, again, with my problem with these folks, is they utilize these arguments that sound like they're for, centrist Democrats, right? That's what they're doing, is they're trying to convince you to support Medicare for all, when the whole disagreement on the left, which is what this guy's trying to, he's framing the conversation as an intra-left conversation, right? And then he's making these arguments that are just weird arguments for Medicare for all when everyone already agrees with that. That's what everyone agrees with, right? So again, it's this weird kind of trying to convince you that other leftists aren't for Medicare for all. It's like a super manipulative fucking framing. Ugh.
That's wrong. It's wrong. This is our greatest moment of leverage. They are never...
Our greatest moment of leverage to get Medicare for all wasn't in the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2020. Reminder, Nick Brana was saying Bernie's a cuck. Jimmy Dore was saying Bernie's a cuck, right? Like, don't support Bernie, support Tulsi Gabbard, right? Like, so the most important moment, the most in time when we had the most leverage was not when Bernie won Nevada. No, it's right now. When Biden is president-elect and Trump is president and we have a Republican Senate. Now's the time with the leverage. What? Like, right? I just...
Only the really, I hate to say this, but those with the lowest IQ
are gonna need us more than they do now. We have to make use of this. What good is a pay-go exemption for Medicare for all if you can't bring Medicare for all to the floor of the House?
Only the really, I hate to say this, but those with the lowest IQ.
Okay, so... Like, again, now, can we just talk about this way of speaking? Wah! Like, every time this guy speaks, he flaps his arms like a bird. I'm sorry, like, it got really kind of, like, over the top at the end there. But my problem with this is, like, again, if we want to force a vote for a whole host of things, that's great. I think Medicare for all is not the highest on the priority list, because even if it did pass, it would be passed with an implementation and transitional period that wouldn't help anyone in the short term, whereas we can have a rent moratorium, we can have, like, student loan forgiveness right now, we can have, like, stimulus right now, there's leverage for that right now. So I think it's a mismanagement of priority. That's my first criticism of forced vote. The second is, like, okay, a pay-go exemption for Medicare for all is first order, and then second order is acquiring more co-sponsors, and then third order is forcing a vote. That's what that is. It's a multi-step process. Now, again, does it suck that this is what we have to put up with? Absolutely. But if we're going to try to change the government, that's what you're getting into. You're trying to force a parliamentary procedure for Medicare for all. If that's your thing, if you're going to rely on electoralism, then you got to realize the realities of the electoral process. Now, again, if you want to say the electoral process is bunk, which personally, right, I wouldn't organize the thing for forcing the vote. I wouldn't organize a mutual aid organizational process. I would try to get community members out to do a march and then meet each other and greet each other, add each other on fucking whatever social media, get in touch with each other, give each other like fucking whatever. Like, that's what I would advocate for. I would advocate for decentralized things that we can do right now. I would advocate for things that are actually good in the short term. I would say, like, again, if you could organize an entire community and help each other pay each other's rent, or if someone needs a place to stay and everyone knows and people are not afraid of being homeless, that can be very transformational, right? And if you've got a podcast, right, with hundreds of thousands of listeners, why wouldn't you advocate for something like that? Why? Because you're unimaginative. You're not a socialist, you're not a communist, you're not an anarchist, you're a social democrat at best who doesn't give a fuck about anything but himself. And the only way that he can try to, like, float their not, and I'm talking about Jimmy Dore, I'm talking about Nick Brana, I'm talking about all these freaks that are doing the force to vote thing. The only way that they can find themselves at the center of attention is by latching on to popular politicians. And it's just pathetic, it's embarrassing, and you're going to see this shit in a campaign ad a couple months from now, and it's going to be funny.
Only the really, I hate to say this, but those with the lowest IQ.
Unbelievable.